Hi there, welcome to How Do I Explain This? And today's episode is really about not giving up. I think I need to hear that myself as well, because there are some weeks that are really challenging. Um, I typically average maybe one crash out a week, um, but now it's been like three, and it's only Thursday. And so I can tell when my hope and my optimism and my energy starts to deplete because I am my inner critic. My inner critic starts to really get louder and louder. And one thing I would say, or one thing that I've recognized, is that while I am very hopeful and very optimistic and very much like get your head down and like keep going regardless of like what the external shows, my inner critic is my biggest fucking hate. She's so mean to me. Um, I even just saying that hurts, I think. When you are just so laissez-faire, life is going to work out for me in my favor. It holds true for the opposite feeling, like the shadow side, which is just all doom and gloom, and every effort or everything that I've done is wasteful. And it makes me go back to the last 18 months and ask myself, where did I go wrong? I think that's where the inner critic kind of comes back and starts retracing my steps and then finding faults in all of my steps or finding faults in all of my choices and how I went about certain things, if I stuck up for myself versus if I, decided to push through something, and I think it is really hard sometimes because I try to treat this inner critic with some space to speak her, give her the room. I give her the space and the floor to just air out what she's been feeling because I do typically have the tendency to be wearing these rose colored glasses and thinking that everything will be fine if I just keep going. But then all of the worries and stressors and, the things outside of my control start piling up and piling up. And I kind of then get to a point where I can't breathe or my throat gets like choked up, which I'm kind of having right now, just thinking about it. Um, but it's in these moments that I really become this version of myself that I become really sad about when she comes out. And maybe I'm kind of feeling like I shouldn't be sad when she comes out. And maybe I should be giving that little girl or teenager, I think she's a teenager because me as a teenager was tough. I was mean. I wasn't mean. I guess I was just like, I hate the world. And I just really put my head down and kept to myself and really felt like everyone's life was better than mine. And I think, yeah, you're right. It is my inner rebel that comes out. Not even my inner rebel. It's like my inner teenage angst, that comes out. And I think that person really probably needs a hug. Somebody give me a hug. Um, but it's like she didn't really have anyone back then. I think about my teenage years and I didn't really have a lot of friends. I really didn't do much and I just studied a lot. And I think in the past few months, I feel as though I've been kind of replicating that version of me because I was very much always in solitude by myself and really focusing on just my creativity and making sense of my business and what it is I want to create and how it is I want to sustain myself. And, you know, back then when I was a teenager, I really had my grades to validate that I at least had something going for me. I was a straight A student, except I wouldn't even say I was a straight A student all 4 years because I ended up getting a B in geometry, and that made me really sad. Which makes sense because when I took Orgo in college, it was like wah 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 wah. I was like, I have no idea what he's saying, and I got a really bad grade in Orgo, and I think that's when I realized I didn't want to be a doctor. But it is tough because I feel as though whenever the inner angsty teenager comes out, in the past, that's when I would typically turn to self-sabotaging tendencies. And, I'd procrastinate, I'd give up, or I would just work myself tires, or I would just work myself tirelessly until I burn out. I would open up every door. I would like be even more cringe and more out there. And then I did hurt. It just hurts thinking about that time. But either way, again, you know, as this inner teenager has kind of been a bit dormant over the last, I wouldn't even say dormant. I think maybe my level of awareness that I was kind of in my teenage angst over the last few months just kind of came to me in this conversation, of course, which is, of course, the whole point of this podcast. But I didn't realize, or I haven't really given her much credit for, I haven't given her much credit for how she's been able to handle some of the waves and some of the crash outs or some of the hard news that she's had to hear or experience because that version of me would have turned to those tendencies that would then lead me astray from my path and from my goals. However, I've been extremely unwavering in them. So shout out. Good job. But it is sometimes. I guess, while it's been nice that I haven't fallen back 100% to those self-sabotaging tendencies or kind of given up, I find that the voice gets meaner. Like, it's more like, yeah, bitch, like, what is this breathwork practice gonna do for you? Or like, or like, how many more meditations can you do until you realize that you're not in your desired reality? It's like this inner critic becomes my defeated self. I guess it's like a self sabotaging tendency, but it's like whenever she comes out, it makes the resistance or the battle that I've been feeling with creating and putting my voice and my thoughts out there more difficult. It scares me because I had to work through a lot of fears around my expression, or I've had to work through a lot of fears related to my self expression, and especially with being vulnerable and letting people into my inner world, my kind of emotional landscape, and just like, the craziness in my brain, because she's funny. Um, and so, whenever this inner critic comes out, or this inner teenager, and she's invalidating all the hard work I've done to get to this point, and also the tools that I've used to kind of ground me and sustain me, it's been disheartening sometimes. I think that is even harder than some of the self-sabotaging tendencies that I would have typically gone towards, like procrastination, escapism. It's like I have a hater on my every move, especially this week where it's like this back of my like in the back of my head, it's this voice that comes up as I'm creating that tells me like what is the point of you doing all of this and putting your heart and your love and your excitement into something that doesn't even get well received by a lot of people or doesn't really get like likes or shares, which, I'm not saying that that's the most important thing, but, I think I can't continue to say that I don't care for acknowledgement or recognition because I I do. Like, and when I say that I do, I think it's more like my inner teenager does because she's never gotten that. Or was always kind of thinking she was the worst at everything that she did and was extremely shy and, saw herself as less than, always, or she saw herself as or she saw that, or she believed that her life was a life of suffering. And I think that theme has come up a lot this week. And ironically, I don't know if I use that right. It has been a little disheartening that she's come out so strong this week because this was kind of the first week in which I created things that made me really happy. That felt like they finally are tying in a lot of the different creative mediums and ways that I use to express my thoughts and my ideas to my audience, to people, to clients, like potential clients. And I look at them, I look at my creations, and I look at how dedicated I've been to posting them and how much uniqueness and fun and, like, weird quirkiness that I add to this stuff. And while I would say, in other weeks, for example, in other weeks when I would do things like this and really put my neck out there, regardless of like how it's received, I always end up feeling so joyful and so proud of myself. Like I come out so much stronger and like I come out so much stronger and happier of myself, regardless of the outcome. But something about this week and my inner teenager coming out and finally putting out things that I have been pumped about for so long. I really wanted to do this radio show, and I'm really happy that I found some sort of opportunity to bridge everything together in this like beautiful cohesive radio show. But yet I remember crying as soon as I posted that because I don't know, it's just really tough to put your heart into something that and see how it's coming together and then still and then accidentally turn to the external and then see that it's not really what you feel here is not what you see out there. And I think I've been really working through that and trying to not let my external bring me down and really turn to patience and trust and faith. But baby, those are all running on me. Like since September, I've just been doing everything in my power to not let all the rejections and all the failures and pass ups and, and low engagement, and no friends and all of that not get to me. But I think that there's a point in which this inner teenager is asking me how much more suffering I can take. And I try really hard to not allow that or allow myself to go down that thought process because it is really scary when I do allow myself to go down that process because I go from being the girl who thinks that she can do it all, that the world is her oyster, that she and anyone in her life can pursue their dreams and aspirations, through integrity and love and care, to the person who really just feels like, what's the point of all of this if I'm meant to have, what is the point of all of this? You know, what is the point of all of this when I feel as though my whole life things have just been dangled in front of me and I would go there and I would put the effort and then when I reach out, grab it, it disappears or it's given to someone else or I was led astray thinking that I could actually get that thing. And so it really makes me go back to my whole conundrum when it comes to my worthiness of obtaining my desires and my dreams because again and of course this all really just kind of does tie back to step 2 with my process which is really helping people understand their response patterns and their self-sabotaging tendencies, because while it is great that we can go back in step one and pull out that story and pull out the key challenges and situations and feelings that you want to embody and kind of convey within your brand and marketing, you also have to understand that there's a flip side to all of this. And so, what I do with my clients then after step one is ask them what they're going to do with all this information now that they've learned it about themselves. And so it's really focused on now being like, cool, we saw the past, we rewrote it in a more compassionate and accepting manner, and now integrated that within your brand. So then, so what? So then it's kind of like, cool. So, how can you set yourself up in your present moment and in your future? Because so many people come to me when they are currently stuck or burnt out or just not, they've lost that spark or the why behind what they're doing. It's great to see that in step one, they get revitalized again. But step two is when it kind of has the potential to fall apart. When I say fall apart, is not necessarily like they're going to fall apart. It's like all the beautiful things that we put together in step one in their story will then have to this is kind of where they then go from step one of their story to step two of being that example to their audience and showing people how they have changed or how they are on a different path through this system. So, in order to do that, they really have to kind of take a deep look at the ways in which they speak about themselves, the ways in which they may be fearful in putting themselves out there in their ideas, either through social media, either through the build of their products or services, or even just simply feeling like I want to be able to share more with people or communicate more with people, but like I'm scared that I'm gonna lose subscribers, or I'm scared that like I'm gonna lose my target audience. It's like all this fear comes back up. And what's really helpful about step one is that because these fears are coming back up in the present moment, we can look back at step one in their story and understand how that fear or that response pattern was kind of created, and how in the past they've supported themselves in overcoming those barriers. I think about that from my own example, which is being fearful and expressing my needs to people. That is something that I am still working through, because I am worried about retaliation or abandonment. And so when that feeling of fear and expressing my needs comes back up, I am able to turn back to moments in my journey in which I was able to overcome that fear. And not just saying, oh, you did it, girl. It's more like, what were the parameters, conditions? What were the things that kind of got me to make that action or inspired me to speak up? I think sometimes it's usually when I'm fed up and I'm like, "Oh, I can't do this anymore." But there are also some times in which certain buttons of mine or certain values of mine are crossed, which then I'm able to speak up with much more ease. And so step two is really important, not just from identifying your self-sabotaging tendencies and response patterns that get you into overwhelm or burnout. Um, they also are really able to help you understand your decision-making process. I had to really learn about what my values were and also what my inner compass, and also creating my own inner compass, not just from a how can I navigate through life, but more like how can I feel my way through things and not necessarily rely only on my brain. And so so the way I would describe it is like step one is like more my brain and more looking at things. And then step two is kind of beginning to bridge the brain with the body and understanding, for example, how little irks throughout our day build up in our body and make it really tense, or when we jump from task to task and we have like slumped shoulders rather than like standing up and taking like a breath. And so I really do enjoy step two because I'm able to kind of be, I guess step two is their inner teenager. Um, yeah, I guess step two is their inner teenager because I think a lot of our teenage years, I'm assuming something to do with hormones, had a very big impact for how we see ourselves in this world. Like, I think that's really the first time our confidence is kind of tested and the world becomes a little bit serious. And going into college as well opens you up to more different experiences and people. And I honestly think that's where comparison really starts to come for me. Like, because I was able to leave my community and go into a different one that was so much more expansive, and people were coming in from all over the world with all different like socioeconomic backgrounds and their own personal experiences and their perspectives on life. It's like college was a melting pot of all of these diverse people who have their own viewpoint and their own way of navigating through the world. And in seeing how other people do it, or seeing how other people hold themselves up, or how other people navigate through this world, it made me realize how inefficient, or I guess at that time, it made me feel like I was deficient, maybe deficient. It just made me feel like, damn, like I didn't know people could live like this. I am much more broke than I thought. I had to work two jobs in college to pay my way through, and I saw people who got a brand new car just for fun, and they have a car at home. They're able to go shopping and go to these amazing restaurants where I have to budget because I have to pay my tuition, I have to pay for my books, my livelihood, and I felt so less than other people. And I think that mentality has definitely stayed with me for a while and definitely carried through to my young professional career and my burnout tendencies of having to prove myself so much to people so that I felt like I deserved a spot in that room. And so it was difficult to kind of go back and create step two, and now to even talk about step two because I'm currently back in this one. Sorry. But again, I think it's totally fine because, throughout all of these steps, the reason that I kind of came to that system or to that through line is because it is continuous. It's not linear. Like my work isn't linear. My work doesn't have a specific step one, then step two, then three. It's more meeting that person. It's more meeting that person where they're at. I do always say we have to start with step one because I do have to understand the person and help them see their story in a different light. And I think that's important to set the foundation. But we can jump to step three, or we can jump to step two and then four, or even step five. Actually, step five might be the last. I think I like bookend it. Okay, I definitely bookend it, and like everything in the middle gets like all jumbled up. But all that to say, step two is really the hardest personally for me, and I think a lot for my clients because they are able to create something so beautiful in step one that they never thought that they could actually get down on paper and built into a system or a business or content strategy. And then they're able to see that vision that they've always had inside, but not were unable to articulate it or even think that it was possible, honestly. And step two then is like, okay, we talked the talk. Now we have to walk the walk. And like, I do hold their hand as we walk this walk, but it's in this walking of the path where the uncertainty pops up, right? We don't know how well received how well, how well received the things or the content or messaging is going to be, facilitated or received by those people or by their audience. And so a lot of times their fear comes back up, tendencies to their tendencies to take every opportunity or to focus on quantity over quality, which I'm not saying one's better than the other, but my focus is really, I'm not saying one is better than the other because I think the focus really is intentionality in the actions and decisions we make. However, they see the quick successes. This is where I get so mad at all the fucking gurus. Like, I swear, put me in a room with some of them, and I know I'm not a violent person, but I also know I'm 5'2". But I have this deep rage and this also deep belief in the fact that I think I can beat anyone up regardless of size or weight. Like, I'm very fast and I'm nimble and I do, and I'm a kickboxer. I have a really mean roundhouse and a mean left hook. Uh, and they would never see me. Anyways, I don't promote violence. I just want to let you guys know that part. I don't promote violence. But if any MMA brands want to sponsor me, I'm here. Put me in the ring. But anyway, so stupid. But anyways, honestly, just talking about this stuff is making me feel a lot better. Step two is also the step in which I find that talking about it is the scariest thing because something about being able to talk about your fears and knowing the ways in which you get in your way out loud feels like you're making something inside your head permanent. And it's scary when you have that connection of like, oh shit, I really actually do this, and now I've told someone I do this, and now it's my responsibility to do something about it. Because when something is brought to your awareness, or at least for me, I'm just like, ah shit, here we go again. We got to do something about this. And so all that really to say is that finding myself right now in step two and hearing how crazy bugging my my inner teenager is right now, and how much I've created, or how much I've really focused on building rituals in my own kind of systems to ensure that I don't allow this thought to, or this voice to go awry or go crazy, and seeing that they're not failing. These systems and rituals aren't failing, but it's my mind being like, bitch, you can only meditate and do breath work or go outside and get movement or create so much until you realize you're not getting shit done. And are not getting shit done, but more like you're not going to get the shit you want, you know? It makes me feel like no matter what I do for myself or for work, it's never going to be enough. And I hate that feeling. I think that's the worst feeling of never feeling enough. And for me, I think I find that that gets triggered when I am ignored. I think that's huge. That one hurt. But being ignored really hurts, I think. Not just from being ignored by people, but, getting ghosted or just not hearing back on certain opportunities or not really getting any sort of engagement on some of the things that I posed. I think being ignored is a really deep wound of mine because, not saying that my family ever ignored me, but I find that I am only good to people when I have a specific role or if they are getting something specific out of me. I feel used when that happens. Like, I feel very used when I get ignored. And I know that that's not that person's intention, or maybe it is, and maybe I am just gullible in that sense, but it being ignored to me is that feeling of why would you push through all of this resistance and fear and, the tears and the lonely nights and like the nights that were really dark, because why would you push through all that and to just be ignored or to feel as though no one gives a fuck about what you're doing. No one cares to support you in your livelihood, or no one sees the things that you see or believe about yourself. And so I think that's definitely one of my biggest self-sabotaging tendencies, because when I am ignored, that is when I shut down. Um, and that's also when I become mean, because not just mean to people, but mean to myself. Like that's when I guess I am mean to people a lot. And then I don't like that. I don't enjoy being a mean person. I don't enjoy being short with people, or I don't, yeah, it's just really tough because as soon as they ignore me and they come back, I'm like, everything is fine, da 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 da. And I'm like, no, it's not. And so, yeah, being ignored fucking hurts. And it feels like I'm used. But in this current context, for me, being ignored feels like I'm an idiot forever thinking I could amount to anything, or that I could bring things into this life that really represent my inner world. And so, yeah, I don't really want to end this on a bad note because I'm still working through that, but it is tough because there's levels of awareness that I feel like I wish I didn't have, like this one. Um, but I would say that something that I do turn to every time I do feel this way is taking care of myself, like treating myself and taking care of my body and feeling good, like just finding something that will make me feel good. And even that in itself is getting tiring. Like I don't know how much I can like make myself feel good or tell myself that I'm pretty and that I'm smart and I can do all these things. Even though I do think I'm pretty and smart. But, there's just, it feels like all the, all my walls or all the walls are kind of coming in on me because I can't do this because I can't do that, and I can't do that because I can't do this. And so I kind of just check out and I just say, I don't care about any of these responsibilities. I'm just gonna take care of myself. And I would say sometimes that works. I would say sometimes that works, but then sometimes I don't get anything done. I get behind, and then I feel like crap about myself because now I'm behind on everything. And I don't know, maybe I should stop, or maybe now I have to think about the feeling of being behind because I'm not behind. I'm right on time. Oh, you see, it's like the way I'm talking about myself. I will say that even if my inner teenager is really loud right now, I'm really focusing on making her laugh because I think laughter really helps me get through tough times. I kind of entertain these voices, and I shouldn't end that with an S because there's only one. I only have one teenage voice. I'm all. Um, but I would then I would make it an intentional thing for me to go online and just create a collection of memes. And so sometimes I just have to remind myself that I am on the right path, even if there's no even if. I'm just going to stop it there. I am on the right path because my intuition is really leading me to create things that I have create and combine things in a way to tell my story that I don't think I in my brain would have come to that own conclusion. And so, ha, inner teenager, take that. Oh, she's gonna beat me up, guys. So, okay. And so, yeah, if I just quickly talk about step two is a very intimate step because I kind of have to hold them accountable. And I think not just accountable to get the work done and to build out the content and to offer their services, but I also have to hold them accountable for how they show up every day, how they see themselves every day in the work that they're doing. I think this is a beautiful step because this is a step in which I always wish I had someone to kind of guide me through or to kind of be that companion as I like work through some of the scary fears and self-sabotaging tendencies that typically pop up in the voices. And it is nice to be able to be that person for people, because I think step two is when people give up and they go back to copying other people's frameworks and models and blah 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 blah. Um, and it is nice for me to be able to, or it makes me happy to be able to remind them of their story and everything that they've done and how they've overcome so much before that, so much before that, that this thing, this content piece, or this medium that they're trying, or this brand that they're building, is a small feat compared to everything else they experienced. And now they have a partner to kind of help them in this new level. And so it's nice. I guess this is where I become a coach. And don't call me a life coach. I'm not a life coach. I am an aspiration artist. And with that, peace and love and blessings as always, Manny.